Thomas Hale had always been a man who wanted very little from life. He didn't dream of fame or riches or even love. He only wanted peace, the kind that filled the air like warm sunlight and let a man breathe without feeling the weight of the world pressing on his chest. But on Earth, peace was rare, too rare. Cities roared like restless beasts, skyways burned bright through endless nights, and even in the countryside, the hum of data signals and noise of politics never really stopped. So Thomas left. He sold everything he owned, his small apartment, his old bike, the few things that still tied him to Earth, and signed a 5-year colonist's contract for a planet so far away it didn't even have an official name yet. The paperwork called it Virella 9. Most people called it a mist world because its surface was wrapped in silver fog almost all the time. To Thomas, it sounded perfect. The first time he stepped out of the shuttle, the silence struck him like a wave. There were no advertisements, no distant chatter, no hovering drones buzzing overhead, just the soft rustle of blue grass moving with the wind, and the low hum of strange, beautiful insects that seemed to sing instead of buzz. The air smelled clean, like rain and soil and something sweet he couldn't name. His assigned cabin stood near a lake that shimmered faintly violet under the planet's twin suns. It wasn't big, but it was solid, made from reinforced colony material, fitted with solar panels and a water recycler. Just enough for one man who wanted to be forgotten. For the first few months, Thomas felt like he had finally found what he'd been chasing all his life. His days were simple. He repaired weather towers, sent environmental reports to the main outpost, and spent evenings sitting by the water, watching the light fade into mist. Sometimes he recorded his thoughts into a small voice log, mostly so he could remember the sound of his own voice. "This is Thomas Hale," he would say softly, still alive, still quiet. At night the stars came out in thick bands across the sky, so many that he sometimes thought they might fall down and drown the world in light. He would lie on the ground outside his cabin, feeling the cool soil under his fingers, and whisper, "This is peace." And for a while, it truly was. But silence has a strange way of changing shape over time. At first it felt like comfort, a warm blanket over his tired soul. But after months of hearing nothing but wind and waves, that same silence began to sound different. It started to echo. It began to feel like emptiness. He tried to ignore it. He filled his days with more work, walked further into the forest to study native plants, and even built small devices just to keep his hands busy. But the quiet always came back, stretching around him like an invisible sea. Then came the night he heard something new. It was faint. Soft steps outside his cabin. He froze, listening. No human was supposed to be here. The nearest colony hub was 40 kilometers away. Slowly, he picked up his flashlight and stepped outside. The fog was thick, glowing silver under the moons, and the lake lay still as glass. Something moved near the water. A figure. Small, slender. Thomas called out, his voice breaking the quiet. "Hello?" The figure turned. For a moment, the mist cleared just enough for him to see her face. Eyes wide and dark as polished stone, skin glowing faintly like moonlight through glass. She wasn't human. Not even close. They stared at each other across the lake. Neither moved. Thomas's heart hammered in his chest. He didn't feel fear, only a strange, heavy sense that his world had just tilted in a way he could never undo. Then softly, she spoke. The words were foreign, but her tone wasn't threatening. It was calm, curious, like she was asking a question. He took a cautious step forward. "I don't understand," he said quietly. "Do you need help?" The girl tilted her head, repeating one strange word, her voice trembling with something that sounded like hope. Thomas didn't know it then, but that single moment, those few words in the mist, would change everything. Because from that night on, the silence he had once loved would never be the same again. He didn't yet know her name. He didn't know where she came from or what she wanted. But in the days to come, that girl in the mist would teach him something he had forgotten long ago. That peace isn't the absence of sound. It's the presence of someone worth listening to. The next morning, Thomas woke before dawn. The mist outside was still thick, curling around the trees like pale smoke. He told himself he had dreamed it all. The girl, the strange glowing skin, the soft voice that seemed to echo inside his head even now. He wanted to believe it had been his imagination. 5 years alone on a silent planet could play tricks on a man's mind. Maybe loneliness had finally decided to wear a face. But when he walked down to the lake, he saw it. Footprints, small, delicate, pressed deep into the soft blue grass near the shore. They weren't shaped like human feet. Longer toes, faint claw marks, light as bird prints. They led right up to the water and stopped there, as if she had simply disappeared beneath the surface. Thomas stood still, his heart thudding softly. "So you were real," he whispered. For the rest of the day, he couldn't focus on his work. Every time the wind shifted, he thought he heard her voice again, soft, musical, like someone humming far away. He told himself not to get involved, not to look for her. He was here for peace, not for mysteries, not for people. But that night, he saw her again. She appeared from the mist like a dream, barefoot with hair that shimmered faintly silver under the moons. She stood at the water's edge, watching him with wide, curious eyes. Thomas froze halfway down the slope. "You again," he said softly. "Are you following me?" She tilted her head. "Kareth," she said carefully, her voice uncertain. He frowned. "I don't know what that means." She took a small step forward, touching her chest. "Sira," she said. Then she pointed to him. "Kareth, Sira," he repeated, and she smiled, sudden and bright, like sunlight through fog. It was the first time he had seen her smile, and it hit him harder than it should have. He pointed to himself. "Thomas." Her lips moved slowly, repeating it like a strange song. "To mus." He laughed softly. "Close enough." She seemed to like that sound, his laugh. Her smile widened, and for a few moments neither spoke. They just looked at each other across the quiet water, the world around them fading into soft mist and rippling light. That was the beginning. From that night onward, Sira came back, always near the same time, just before sunset, when the twin suns painted the lake in gold and violet. She would sit near him on the grass, quiet but curious, watching everything he did. Thomas started teaching her words. He would point to things, the sky, the trees, the lake, and say their names slowly. She would repeat them, sometimes correctly, sometimes not, but always with that same light in her eyes. She taught him too. Her language was full of soft tones and rhythmic sounds, more like music than speech. She showed him how to listen to the wind moving through the trees. "The world speaks," she would say in broken English. "You only need to hear." It was strange how natural it felt, this connection between them. Two creatures from different stars sitting side by side like old friends. One evening she brought him something, a piece of glass-like crystal, glowing faintly blue. She pressed it into his hand. "Gift," she said shyly. Thomas turned it over in his palm. "It's beautiful," he whispered. Sira nodded. "It remembers light," she said, "like your eyes." The words caught him off guard. He didn't know what to say, so he just smiled. For the first time in years, he felt something shift inside him. A warmth he hadn't known since before he'd left Earth. He found himself waiting for her visits, counting the hours until she appeared again. The loneliness that had haunted him for so long began to fade, replaced by something softer, something alive. But even as the bond between them grew, part of Thomas tried to resist it. He reminded himself that she wasn't human, that her world wasn't his. He was a guest here, a quiet observer, nothing more. Getting close could only end in pain. Still, when Sira laughed, he forgot all of that. The sound filled the air like bells. It felt like the planet itself was laughing with her. And somewhere deep down, Thomas began to wonder if the universe had played a trick on him. He had come here to escape people, to find silence. But instead he had found a voice that made silence beautiful again. Days turned into weeks, and the strange rhythm of Thomas's quiet life began to change. Every morning he still woke early to check the weather towers and repair the colony sensors. But now, he was no longer alone. He had company, unexpected, mysterious and bright as the morning sun cutting through the fog. Sira came to him almost every day. Sometimes she would already be waiting near the lake when he stepped outside, her silver hair glimmering in the soft light. Other times she appeared soundlessly from the trees, as if the forest itself had shaped her from mist. At first, Thomas didn't know what to do with her presence. He was used to silence, to solitude. He had built his life around distance and quiet routines. But Sira didn't fit into any of those patterns. She brought sound back to his world. Soft, laughter, broken words. The rustle of her bare feet through grass. She was learning fast. Every evening, Thomas would sit beside the lake and teach her English. He would draw shapes and letters in the soil, repeating the sounds until she could mimic them. Her accent was strange, musical, and sometimes she mixed his words with hers, creating phrases that sounded like poetry. One evening he pointed to himself and said, "Man," then he pointed to her. "Woman," she nodded, eyes curious. "Man, woman." Then she frowned slightly and asked, "Same?" Thomas smiled. Not quite the same, but not so different either. That answer seemed to make her think deeply. She sat quietly for a long time, tracing lines in the dirt with her fingers. Finally, she whispered something in her own language, words that sounded soft and sad. "What does that mean?" Thomas asked gently. She looked at him. "Means, we forget. My people. Forget other worlds. We stay here. Alone." He didn't know what to say. He recognized that loneliness, the same kind that had brought him across the stars. So he simply said, "Then maybe we remember together." Sira looked at him, her dark eyes shimmering like the lake under starlight. She didn't answer, but the small smile on her lips said everything. The days after that were filled with small, quiet miracles. Sira showed him things he would never have discovered alone. She taught him which plants were safe to eat, how to listen to the sound of distant storms before they reached the valley, and how to find the faint glowing shells of the night creatures that hid beneath the blue grass. In return, Thomas showed her how to use tools, how to fix simple circuits, clean solar panels, and measure the weather. She watched him work with intense focus, as if every motion he made was a secret worth remembering. Once, when his generator broke down, she spent hours beside him helping fix it, handing him tools without him even asking. When it finally powered on again, Sira clapped her hands and laughed with pure delight. Thomas laughed too. "You're a quick learner," he said. She tilted her head, still smiling. "You teach good?" Then she placed her hand over his heart. "Hear good." The gesture stunned him. For a second, he forgot to breathe. He gently took her hand away, trying to calm the sudden warmth in his chest. "Careful, Sira. Humans and don't always understand touch like that." Her smile faded a little. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He sighed softly. "No, don't be. It's just different for me." Sira nodded, looking down. But that night, when she left, Thomas felt an emptiness in the air that followed her into the forest. As the weeks passed, the bond between them deepened in quiet ways neither of them fully understood. They began to share food, share words, even share silence. Sometimes they would sit side by side for hours without speaking at all, listening to the wind move through the trees and the water ripple against the shore. Thomas often caught himself watching her when she didn't notice. The way she tilted her head at every sound, how her eyes caught the light, how she seemed to belong so naturally to this world while he was still a stranger here. He started to realize that she had become part of his peace, an essential part. Without her, the silence he once loved now felt empty again. But deep inside, a quiet fear grew. He knew he didn't belong here forever. His contract would end one day, and the ships would come to take him home. And when that day came, what would happen to her? He tried not to think about it. He tried to stay in the moment, to enjoy the sound of her laughter and the comfort of her presence. And for a while, that was enough. Because for the first time in many years, Thomas Hale didn't just exist, he lived. He didn't yet understand what Sira truly meant to him, or what her people's customs would bring into his life. But fate had already begun to write their story, and soon his peaceful little world would be shaken in ways he could never imagine. The evening was quiet, painted in shades of gold and blue. Thomas sat near the lake, finishing his report to the main outpost. It had been an ordinary day, routine checks, a minor sensor fix, and dinner packed in a metal tin. But the air felt strange that night, as if something was waiting to happen. He glanced toward the trees, half expecting Sira to appear. She had been visiting less often these past few days. Sometimes she vanished for a whole week, saying she had duties in her forest home. Each time she left, Thomas tried to tell himself he didn't mind, but he did. The silence she left behind was heavier now, sharper, like it remembered her absence too well. Just as he was about to return inside, he saw her. She came walking through the mist, soft and quiet as always, but tonight she looked different. Around her wrists were woven vines, green and silver, glowing faintly in the dusk. Her hair was braided, and tiny crystal beads shimmered between the strands. Her expression was calm, but her eyes, those deep, starlit eyes, carried a strange determination. Thomas stood. "Sira, you're back." She nodded and smiled faintly. "I go far, but I come for you." "For me?" He frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" Sira stepped closer until she was standing right before him. The air between them seemed to hum, soft and warm. She reached out and touched his chest gently, right over his heart. "Kareth Sila," she said quietly, her voice trembling. He blinked. "What's that?" She took a deep breath. Her English was still broken, but her words came slow and careful, full of meaning. "It means my chosen, my life, my forever one." Thomas's mouth went dry. He stepped back a little. "Sira, wait, what does that mean exactly?" Her eyes softened, but her voice was firm. "It means I give bond, my people. We choose one soul in whole life. We stay, we protect, we belong." Thomas felt the world tilt under him. His mind tried to understand, but his heart was already racing. "Sira, that's not something you can just decide like that. I'm human. I don't even understand your customs." "You do not need understand," she said softly. "Your heart knows." He shook his head. "No, you don't understand. I came here to be alone. I didn't come here to belong to anyone." For a long moment she just looked at him, her expression unreadable. Then she lowered her hand slowly, the light fading from her bracelets. "You do not want?" she asked in a small voice. Thomas swallowed hard. "Sira, it's not that I don't care. You're important to me. But this is too much. I can't promise something like that." Her eyes shimmered with something he had never seen before. Hurt. She took a step back. "I think human heart fear too easy," she said quietly. "But I understand." He wanted to say something more, to explain, to make her stay, but the words stuck in his throat. Before he could find them, she turned away and walked into the mist. The vines around her wrists glowed one last time before fading into the night. The next morning she was gone. Days passed, then weeks. No footprints near the lake, no soft voice calling his name. The silence returned, complete, perfect, suffocating. Thomas tried to focus on work, but his hand shook when he fixed the tools. He stopped recording his daily logs because he couldn't stand hearing his own voice without hers. Every time he looked at the lake, He felt an ache deep inside, a space where something beautiful used to live. He realized then that peace and loneliness were not the same thing. He had run from people all his life, thinking solitude would save him. But Sira had shown him a different kind of quiet, one filled with laughter, warmth, and gentle words. Now that she was gone, the silence was just noise again. At night he would sit outside his cabin and stare at the forest, hoping to see the faint glow of her bracelets. But the trees stayed still, and the mist gave no answers. He whispered her name once, just to hear it. Sira. The sound broke something inside him. He didn't know how long it would take for her to forgive him, or if she ever would. But deep in his heart, he knew one thing with painful certainty. He had already been claimed, whether he accepted it or not. And somewhere in that vast forest, an alien girl with silver eyes was carrying the same silence in her heart. A silence that once felt peaceful, but now hurt like love left unfinished. The days after Sira's disappearance were heavier than any silence Thomas had ever known. Before her, the quiet of Virella 9 had been peaceful, soft like a blanket over his thoughts. But now it was sharp. It pressed on him like a weight he couldn't shake off. The wind still whispered through the blue grass, the waves still touched the shore. Yet everything sounded empty, lifeless. She was gone. He told himself it was better this way, that he had done the right thing. He wasn't meant for love. He wasn't meant to belong to anyone, especially not someone from another world. But no matter how many times he repeated that to himself, it didn't bring him peace. Each morning, he'd step outside his cabin and look toward the lake, half expecting to see her there again, her silver hair, her bright eyes, her soft smile. But there was nothing, just fog and wind and the soft hum of distant insects. He tried to bury himself in work. He repaired the weather towers, cleaned his tools, sent reports to the outpost, but his heart wasn't in it. His hands moved out of habit, not purpose. Sometimes he would catch himself turning to say something, only to realize there was no one there to answer. At night, the loneliness grew worse. He'd lie in bed and listen to the faint sounds outside, the creak of the trees, the soft movement of the mist, and imagine Sira's voice among them. Sometimes, half asleep, he thought he heard her calling his name. He would sit up quickly, heart pounding, but the sound always faded into nothing. He stopped eating properly. He forgot to shave. He even ignored messages from the main colony. The people there probably thought he was just tired from isolation, but he knew better. He wasn't tired. He was empty. It was strange. He had come all this way across the stars to escape people, to live alone, and he had done it successfully, completely. Yet now that same solitude felt like punishment. He missed her laughter, her awkward English, the way she'd tilt her head when she didn't understand something. He missed her silence too, the kind that wasn't cold but calm and full of life. One evening, as the suns were setting, he sat by the lake again. The water was smooth like glass, reflecting the orange sky. He stared into it and saw his own reflection, tired, unshaven, and older than he remembered. He whispered, "You wanted peace, Thomas. This is it." But the words felt hollow. Peace wasn't what he had now. This was something else, something that clawed at his chest and refused to let go. Days became weeks. The fog thickened as the season changed. Thomas started to wander into the forest, searching without meaning to. He followed paths Sira had once shown him, the stream that led to the glowing stones, the tree that bent low like a gate, the hollow where they once sat to watch the sky. But she wasn't there. Sometimes he found signs of her people, woven markings on tree trunks, faint glowing vines hanging from branches, but no one ever appeared. It was as if they had vanished into the mist. He wanted to apologize, to tell her that he hadn't meant to hurt her, that he had only been afraid of losing what little peace he had built, afraid of breaking something pure. But now he understood. In trying to protect his peace, he had destroyed it. He thought of her words the night she left. Human heart fear too easy. She had been right. One night, after too many sleepless hours, Thomas walked to the lake again. The sky was clear for once, full of stars that shimmered across the heavens. Their reflections spread over the water like 1,000 tiny lights. He took the glowing crystal she had given him long ago from his pocket. It was still faintly blue, still alive with the memory of her touch. He held it up to the starlight and whispered, "I'm sorry, Sierra, I didn't understand." The wind stirred softly, carrying the faint scent of rain and wildflowers. For a brief moment he thought he heard her voice again, gentle, far away, almost like the wind itself. Then it was gone. Thomas stood there for a long time, staring at the horizon. The mist moved slowly over the lake, swallowing the reflection of the stars one by one. He realized then that peace wasn't silence and it wasn't distance. Peace was something living, something shared, and he had let it slip away. He closed his eyes and made himself a quiet promise. If he ever saw her again, he wouldn't run from her. He would listen this time, truly listen. Because now he finally understood that peace without her wasn't peace at all. It was just another kind of loneliness wearing a prettier face. The storm came without warning. It began with a low growl in the distance, a strange vibration that made the air feel alive. Thomas was inside his cabin reading old notes when the lights flickered and the power display flashed red. He frowned and checked the console. One of the colony sensors near the ridge was picking up unusual movement, something large, metallic, and fast. He stepped outside. The sky above Varela 9 was changing color, deep gray clouds swirling like angry smoke. Lightning flashed across the horizon, splitting the mist with white fire. The wind tore through the blue grass, bending it flat to the ground. Thomas grabbed his scanner and checked again. The readings were clear. A human mining drone had entered the area. Heavy class, automated, likely sent from the main colony for expansion. But that wasn't right. This area was marked as a preservation zone. No one was supposed to be mining here. His stomach turned cold. That ridge led straight toward the forest, the same forest where Sierra lived. He tried to contact the main outpost, but the storm was too strong. The signal broke apart with static. "Command, this is Hale. Cancel drone 4B's route. It's—" Crackle, silence. He didn't wait. He ran to the rover, heart pounding, rain already hammering the roof. The engine roared to life as he sped toward the ridge. Every few seconds, lightning lit up the world in flashes of silver and blue. The scanner beeped faster. The drone was close. As he climbed higher, he saw it. A dark shape moving between the trees, taller than the trees themselves. Metal arms cut through the forest like blades. Sparks flew where the claws tore through wood and soil. It was clearing the sacred grove. Sierra's home, damn it. Thomas shouted, slamming the rover to a stop. He jumped out into the storm, running toward the machine. His boots sank into the mud, rain soaking through his clothes. Then he saw her. Sierra. She stood in front of the massive drone, arms outstretched, the glowing vines around her wrists, bright with energy. Her hair whipped in the wind, her voice lost in the thunder as she screamed something in her own language. The machine didn't stop. Thomas's heart stopped instead. "Sierra!" She turned just as the drone's arm swung down. He ran faster than he ever had in his life, the rain blinding his eyes, his lungs burning. He reached her just in time, grabbing her arm, pulling her aside as the machine's claw hit the ground where she'd been standing. The shockwave threw them both to the dirt. He rolled, shielding her with his body as debris rained down. When the ground finally stopped shaking, Sierra opened her eyes. "Thomas," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You came." He nodded, gasping for breath. "Of course I came. I couldn't let it hurt you." The machine moved again, gears grinding. It turned toward them. The red sensor lights blinked like cold, unfeeling eyes. Thomas knew it wouldn't stop until it finished its task, or until he stopped it. He helped Sierra up. "Run! Get your people out of here!" But she shook her head. "No, I stay. My home. My heart." He stared at her, lightning flashing between them, and then, without another word, he turned toward the rover. Inside, he ripped open the control panel, connecting his console to the drone's signal. He knew these machines. He had helped maintain smaller ones before. With enough power, he could overload its core, make it shut down. But it would take everything the rover had. Rain poured down his face as his fingers flew over the keys. The connection locked. "Come on, come on." The drone's engines roared louder. It raised its claw again, ready to crush everything. Then the system beeped. Overload engaged. A flash of blue light burst from the rover, a wave of static cutting through the storm. The drone froze mid-motion. Sparks shot from its body. Then it collapsed, shaking the ground as its power core burned out. Silence. Only the rain remained. Thomas stumbled out of the rover, soaked, shaking. Sierra ran to him, her eyes wide with fear and relief. She reached out, touching his face gently. "Why?" she asked in a broken whisper. "You said you did not want to be mine. Why you come?" He looked at her, mud on her cheeks, rain on her lips, light from the burning machine shining behind her, and for the first time, he couldn't hide the truth anymore. "Because I couldn't lose you," he said softly. "I thought I wanted peace, but peace means nothing if you're not in it." Sierra's lips trembled. She pressed her forehead to his, her voice barely audible through the rain. "Then stay." He closed his eyes. "I will." Above them, the storm began to fade. The wind softened. The first rays of dawn broke through the clouds, touching the wet forest with pale light. The grove was damaged but still alive, just like them. And for the first time since he had left Earth, Thomas Hale didn't feel alone anymore. He had found something stronger than silence. He had found someone worth breaking it for. The storm had passed, but the world still smelled of rain and smoke. The grove lay wounded, its trees bent and broken, the air filled with the faint hum of dying machines. The mining drone was nothing more than a silent heap of metal now, its glowing eyes gone dark. Thomas stood there in the aftermath, his hands shaking from exhaustion. His clothes were torn, his face streaked with mud, but his heart beat with something fierce and alive. Sierra stood beside him, her silver hair plastered against her skin, her bracelets dim but still glowing softly. They didn't speak for a while. There was nothing to say. Only the wind moved between them, whispering through the broken trees. Finally, Sierra turned to him, her eyes shining with tears that reflected the faint morning light. "You'd save us," she said softly. "You stopped the metal beast." "Why you help?" Thomas looked at her, his voice rough. "Because I couldn't watch them destroy your home. I couldn't watch you disappear again." Sierra studied him quietly, as if trying to see the truth hidden beneath his words. "You still not understand," she whispered. "You're part of home now. Not just mine, forest, wind, all know your name." He smiled weakly. "I don't think the forest knows who I am, Sierra." She stepped closer. "It does," she insisted. "You hear it too, yes?" "The world speaks," he paused. The wind brushed against his face, carrying the sound of rustling leaves, the soft rhythm of dripping water. And for the first time, he thought he did hear something more, a kind of heartbeat in the air, deep and gentle, as if the planet itself was breathing around them. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, maybe I do." They worked together for hours, clearing debris, tending to the wounded trees. Sierra used her glowing vines to heal cracks in the roots, humming softly as she worked. Thomas followed her lead, helping where he could. Their hands brushed often, but neither pulled away. When the grove finally grew quiet again, they sat beside the lake. The water was calm now, mirroring the bright morning sky. Sierra leaned her head on his shoulder, her body trembling slightly from fatigue. Thomas spoke after a long silence. "When I came here," he said, "I just wanted peace. I thought peace meant being alone, away from people, away from everything." Sierra looked up at him, listening. "But then you came," he continued, "and suddenly silence wasn't enough anymore. You filled it with something better, with meaning." Her lips curved into a faint smile. "And now," he looked into her eyes, those endless dark eyes that held the color of distant stars. "Now I think peace isn't silence at all, it's being with someone who listens when the world gets loud." Sierra's smile widened, tears shining again. She reached for his hand, pressing it gently against her chest. "Then hear this," she said softly. "This is my heart. It beats same as yours now. I choose once, I never unchoose." Thomas's throat tightened. He understood now what she had meant the night she claimed him. It wasn't about ownership or control. It was about a promise. An eternal bond made not with words, but with the soul. He squeezed her hand. "Then I choose too." Her eyes widened in surprise, then softened with joy. "You mean—" "You are mine." He nodded slowly. "Yes, if you'll have me." Sierra laughed quietly, a sound like the wind through chimes. She leaned forward and touched her forehead to his. The light from her bracelets flared softly, glowing warm and golden, wrapping around both of them like a gentle fire. "The forest hears," she whispered. "It knows now you are part of it. You are home." That night the sky cleared completely for the first time in months. The twin moons rose high, silver and pale, their light spilling across the quiet lake. Thomas and Sierra stood hand in hand, watching the stars. He thought of Earth for a moment. of the noise, the chaos, the endless rush of people chasing something they could never find. He realized he didn't miss any of it. What he had found here on this mist-covered world was worth more than all the comfort and company he had left behind. He had come seeking silence. He had found love. As the night deepened, Sira turned to him. "You stay?" she said softly, almost a question. Thomas looked at her, at the glow of her eyes, the way the starlight danced across her face. "Yes," he said. "I stay." She smiled, her expression peaceful, and rested her head against his chest. The sound of their hearts seemed to blend together in the still air, steady and sure. The world around them was quiet again, but not empty. This silence was alive. It breathed, it loved, it remembered, and for the rest of his days, Thomas Hale would never again call silence lonely. He would call it home.